Hey, it's Jack, and this video is called Can We Trust Our Feelings and Intuition? Hey, if you're new here or you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I would love you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Just click the button here in the right-hand corner of the screen, and you'll get the bell notification when you do that. Click that as well, because then you will hear of new videos and new announcements as they come out. And if you haven't taken my webinar, I would love for you to do that. If you are a woman that's looking for more in relationship, just go ahead, click the link below this video and find a time that works for you in your time zone. It's some of the best teaching material that my business partner and I, Clayton, have put out in this topic, and we've been getting rave reviews. It's really punchy. It's 3 keys to being relationship ready, and I'd love for you to experience it if you haven't experienced it yet. Just click that link and find a time that works for you. Okay, so can we trust our feelings and intuition? Of course you can't. You need to be logical and rational, think things through, overthink, overanalyze, and then you'll get to your answers. Thanks very much. I'm Jack. I'll be with you soon. Okay, so probably not. Let's get into this. I'm reminded in getting into this, I remember being in my London days, I remember being worried about whether to stay in a relationship. And I remember meeting up with a then friend who was running a really big personal development organization, and he said to me, yeah, if you could discern the difference between your fear and your intuition, kind of like your life would be sorted. And although it didn't teach me how to do that, it set up a distinction that was really powerful for me. I was like, oh yeah, I totally get that. If I knew which kind of voice in my head to trust, my life would be way easier. And so a lot of the last decade for me has, directly and indirectly been about that exploration of getting more attuned to myself to notice when is my fear talking and when is my intuition talking. And so I want to throw down some things in this video to see if I can help you in this territory. One of the things just right off the bat that I notice might distinguish fear and intuition, for me at least, is that fear tends to have a more contracted quality. When it's a fear that's coming up in me, I tend to physiologically feel contracted, tight, afraid, kind of like a little bit of a do or die. Like, I better get this right. I better get this right. I can't afford to get the wrong decision here. And there's this sort of like internal pressure that mounts on myself. Like it has this sort of make or break feeling to it. And that's not to say that there aren't times in life that are make or break, but a lot of the times that this has come up for me, when I really relax on the other side of my fear, it's like, oh, this wasn't actually as important as I thought it was. So my fear tends to I tend to breathe less. It tends to physiologically restrict me, tends to have me breathing shallower and faster. So you might want to look out for some of the physiological correlates. By comparison, for me, when my intuition is coming over me, it's more like it's got this kind of quieter, more open, expanded quality, a little bit of like, okay, just something that kind of like drops into my reality. Like I might be walking, riding, in the shower, cooking, just kind of going about my day, and then this sort of something drops in. It often has this sense that it's kind of dropping in, that it's not like I thought my way to it, that it's just like an idea that kind of arrives, and there's this sort of sense of, yeah, that just kind of seems right. And I don't necessarily have reasons, I don't necessarily have rationale. I try as best I can to perhaps keep out of that, and just to notice there's a sort of vibration of rightness, of, yeah, it's kind of like a quiet knowing quality. Now, you may have all other sorts of physiological experiences around your intuition, right? There's definitely a difference for a lot of us between a sort of more gut knowing bodily intuition and a more kind of third eye or kind of higher mind intuition. And, access to both of those things can be important. But I think both of them have that more kind of open, unrestricted quality versus our fear, which for me at least has, rather than like the intuition that just sort of lands and kind of takes root, my fear has this more kind of, it's more like a fly that's buzzing around on a window that it can't get out of. It's kind of noisy, it's kind of interrupting, it's kind of cyclical, it's kind of winding itself up. And the more I'm paying attention to it, the less I'm feeling at ease in my body, the more I'm feeling dysregulated, the more I'm feeling kind of amped up. So I would say the best place to go to first here is your body for a clue as to which one you might be in. So all of this to say that I have a view of reality, which is that most of us receive guidance. Most of us, if we tune into it, can receive information about right action, information about what we're meant to be doing, what we're not meant to be doing, information about, where to put our attention, information about what's important to us. And I call that guidance. You might call that higher self. You might call that all sorts of things. But the sense is that actually our life has some intelligence that's flowing through it that allows us to walk the path ahead, to make good decisions, and that it's not only by thinking things through that we come to our best decisions. That's kind of the view of the rational mind, right? And that's almost the view oftentimes of your fear. Like, yep, you better think this through, get the paper, do a list of pros and cons, weigh it up, don't make a mistake now. That's kind of how it occurs to me. And I've found that I rarely make great decisions when I sit down and weigh up the pros and cons of them. That might work in some instances, but for me at least, there's this more kind of intuitive guidance that can be operating when I'm willing to be in touch with it. And it's been interesting and kind of humbling for me to notice that there are certain things it's easy for me to do this, but there are some that I might get really tight about. Like if there's a sort of a big enough fear of loss of making a wrong decision, it can be really hard for me to stay close to my intuition. There's a tendency for my fear to come up, right? If it's sort of like, oh, doesn't really matter, we'll lose a few bucks, or the same opportunity will come up, in a few weeks' time or a few months' time or next year. But things that have a kind of one-off quality to them, where it feels very much like a fork in the road, those decisions, historically speaking, have been really hard and can sometimes still be quite hard. And I'll often do this with clients, say like, okay, well, let's have you take less responsibility for this particular decision. Let's let life shoulder the responsibility for this. So turn the decision over to life. Turn this decision over to something higher. And if you are doing that and you still don't get clear guidance about which path to walk or what decision to make, you can almost treat it a bit like, okay, let's cost a toin. Yeah, because we're all cost toiners, aren't we? Let's toss a coin. There's a kind of 50-50 element to it, because you've turned it over to life, and life isn't showing you either way, right? So it's sort of like, well, if life, I'm listening, I'm praying, I'm receiving. If you're not willing to give me a clarity about which one of these is better, then maybe it doesn't matter. Right? And that might sound a little facetious to you, but it allows you to say, well, look, life, if I'm doing my best, all I can do is my best, right? All I can do is participate and receive as much guidance or tune into my higher self as best I can. And if I've really done that, and I've taken the time, I've shown up, and it's still not clear, then, walk one path and see what happens. Like, don't fear the loss of guidance so much that it kind of paralyzes you or has you in self-doubt or inner criticism. It's sort of like, yeah, life, if you really want me to know, if you really, let's put this into another real context for a lot of you, if you really want me to know that this is my person, right, that this is my soulmate or my life partner, let me know. If you're not going to let me know and I'm listening and you really don't let me know, then okay, I don't want to be responsible for that. It's not being irresponsible, it's just not taking the burden, the guilt of the doubt of I have to do it the right way, I have to be a good decision maker. It's kind of like, I showed up, I did my best, and my best is enough. So it's a way for a lot of us of getting off our own back, is to actually show up, but then it's not like being overly responsible. It's like having an appropriate and sober relationship with responsibility, that you're not under-responsible, but you're not over-responsible. You show up, and then you let it go, right? It's a bit like back in the day when I was more in the startup world. I used to use this phrase, surrendered entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship, go out there, make it happen, do your best, and then surrender, right? You can only do so much. And if you start taking on things that aren't your responsibility, then that's when you kind of, you're playing the universe's or God's role. It's like it's not really your role to play. So all of this to say, in answer to the question, can you trust your feelings and intuition? Rather than seeing that as like a sort of yes-no answer, I would encourage you to see it as a practice. The practice of becoming more connected to your intuition. If you think of like the old style radios, maybe you still have a radio, you kind of turn the dial and then you kind of go back and forth a little bit and you kind of tune it in to the right frequency so you can hear it properly. That, for a lot of us, is a bit like how our guidance, our intuition operates. It's a channel, it's a frequency, and you've got to get better at picking up on it, better at noticing, the physical correlates in your body. Like, yep, okay, yeah, that sort of openness, that kind of aha-ness, that just, I'm noticing that more clearly. And that takes practice for most of us, particularly for those of us that are head types. And another way of saying head type is fear type, right? We tend to fear and anticipate what's going to come in the future. So if that's true for you, you may have a hard time noticing this other frequency, and so you may have to practice it. And it's not about always being tuned into that frequency. It's about noticing when there's static, right? So in the same way that you can tune in a radio and you can notice, yeah, okay, that's a really good signal, we're hearing it well, or I'm not hearing it well, and maybe today I can't even tune it in, maybe the equipment, the weather, whatever, I'm not actually going to get a clear signal, but I notice that. I don't pretend that I'm getting a clear signal. I don't say, yeah, this program, I can hear it really clearly. Right? In the same way, if you don't have a clear guidance and intuition, you just acknowledge that, right? It's the permission to not know. You know when you know, and you know when you don't know. And you give yourself permission to not know, and you can pray, you can meditate, you can invite life to give you more clarity. But if you don't know, you don't arrive at knowing by pretending you know or forcing you know. You arrive at knowing by noticing I don't know, and when I know, I'll know. And if I need to know, I'll know. Sometimes you might never know. There might be things that you and I just don't know ever in this lifetime. That's not ours to know. We don't get access to it, or it's not yet knowable, or for whatever reason, we're just kind of relaxed into the mystery of it all. But what we don't want to do is to activate our own separation from ourselves, our own lack of attunement to ourselves by pretending we know when we don't. And again, this is sometimes easier said than done. I can think of instances even recently in my own life where it's like, God, it would be convenient to have known by now because, a deadline's coming up, or a lease needs to be signed, or a contract needs to be negotiated with someone, and there's a finiteness, and I would really appreciate having some knowing. But if the clarity isn't there, you just have to accept it, I think. Particularly if you've shown up, particularly if you've hit your journal, gotten quiet, sat on your cushion, been in nature, whatever it is, that the things that kind of amplify your ability to be close to yourself and for that kind of intuition and guidance to come in, that's all you can do. So a big part of this is actually, as I'm noticing now talking, is actually relaxing your inner critic and relaxing the doubter in you. For some of you, your doubter, your skeptic, maybe the way that you orient to reality. You may know reality because you probe it and you say, is that true? Are you reliable? Are you trustworthy? And that is a head function, and it's a great function to have. It's sort of like an investigative journalism. You want to be able to deploy that, but you don't ideally, I think, want it to be your unconscious orientation to reality, because when that happens, it starts to take you away from your intuition, because your way of knowing is more through mental probing and asking difficult questions. And it's sort of assuming that you wouldn't know something's true until you kind of push it enough. It's like, if I want to invite forth your essence, I don't get to know your essence by saying, is this it? Is this your essence? Are you here? Can I trust you? Are we good? Are you going to show up? Is this the true you? Right? It's kind of exhausting. And in the same way, you might want to orient to like allowing things to emerge in your life that you don't have to push and kind of challenge them so much. That might be your personality and keeping you safe, right? That your skepticism, you might think it's being smart. Maybe in some instances it is. Maybe in some instances your skepticism and doubt is actually a vehicle to keep you away from yourself. It's a sort of pseudo way. It's the personality trying to keep you safe, but it's not this kind of deeper, more essential place the way your guidance and your knowing may come from. So oftentimes what interrupts our intuition is our fear, and as much as that, it's our doubt. And doubt is a little more insidious than fear. Most of us, when we're really afraid and it's kind of like, it's in our bellies and it's kind of gripped us and we're kind of fixated on something, we kind of know we're fearful. Doubt is a little more subtle versus fear. Doubt is about, yeah, I doubt that's true. I doubt that person's going to like me. I doubt I'm going to want to be invited on a second date. I doubt they're even going to invite me on a second date. And learning to notice, like, okay, that doubt is actually this sort of way of trying to keep you safe, but it also stops you being in touch with the real you, right? It's a sort of fixed distance. It's a doubt that says, okay, yeah, I'm going to keep looking. I doubt. I kind of keep life over there a little bit. Whereas when you relax that doubt, you may be a bit more vulnerable and intimate to you to notice, like, wow, I have to be with my not knowing. And for most of us, it's hard to be with our not knowing, particularly if we haven't been living life from that place. There's a whole lot of stuff that we don't know, but we become more interested, more interested in what we know, less interested in what we believe. Right? The more interested we become in what we know, the less we might go around just noticing, oh, I need to have a belief about this. I believe that this person's good. I believe that life happens this way. There's going to be a little relaxing of the beliefs, more in service of this kind of intuitive knowing, right? When you really know something, you don't have to believe much about it. I'll probably pick that up, at large in another video. But for this, I'm really trying to distinguish. Your doubt is a spiritual malady. Right? That might be a bit harsh to hear, but your doubt, rather than it being the sort of preserver of reason and the rational mind, your doubt is a kind of skepticism. It's fear in clothing that's trying to keep you safe, but it's doing that by actually disconnecting you from your embodied knowing. And your embodied knowing is probably what most of you watching this are going to be more interested in as a discernment of what wants to happen in your life, as a discernment of who you're becoming, and a discernment of making decisions that are in line with your own authenticity. So yes, I think you can trust your intuition. I think intuition is more, it's not the same thing as feelings, right? I think feelings are a little more like a rise and a fall. I think your intuition tends to have this sort of more ongoing kind of knowing reality to it. But you can only trust it to the extent that you practice it. You can only trust it to the extent that you are embodied. You can only trust it to the extent that you're not locked up here in your head and your doubt and your fear and your skepticism. And you can only trust it to the extent that you can discern that signal in the same way as the radio, that when you really get to tune in, like, oh yeah, okay, this is my knowing. And it can be highly inconvenient. It might not make any rational sense at times, but the more you tune into that, the more you'll know its signal and you'll know its goodness. So here's hoping to your being able to dial your intuition more in your life. Here's hoping that you can notice, discern, and relax your fear and doubt patterns. As always, questions and comments below this video. I'd love to know what your experience in this territory is. And again, thanks for being here. I love that you're part of this community. My name's Jack.